criticism should wait until we speak about the main motion.
And I'm happy to let that proceed and come back to the main motion, but I will make my statements, and it is related to exactly what you're talking about, Mrs. Mann, which is the process used. And that's directly what you've been discussing, is the process used to arrive at the phrasing and the goals and objectives.
Madam President, would you repeat my motion?
The motion is to amend the motion to the top two with the most votes in each area.
And that's exactly what my statements address, is the way that that vote was reached in those areas, and that's why it's pertinent.
Mr. Rowland, I'm looking at you as
Madam President, it's appropriate for you to rule on the board member's point of order.
okay. Ms. Hanson, since you believe it's appropriate to go with these, the way this was discussed, then you may have the floor.
Thank you. What I want to go back on is the process and how we arrived at those goals. And I'm suggesting that we're sitting here tonight being asked to approve a strategic plan that had a good beginning and some potential a year and a half ago. There is nothing wrong with the draft itself. Actually, I wrote the draft a year and a half ago myself, and I wrote it from some successful models that districts and counties had used. I took the strategic areas from community and from successful plans and took the objective statements for that as well. I put in an extra amount of objectives. At one point when I submitted the draft, I think in February 2011, we had 10 or 11 objectives that we could have potentially looked at, and Ms. Mayo's asking to whittle that down to a top 2. That was purposefully overwritten to make it something that the community could engender discussion. It had too many goals and absolutely needed to be whittled down. But the intent was to start with a draft that we could react to. And unfortunately, a year and a half ago, it had potential when I first brought that forward. And Mrs. Whitmarsh and I did start to engage in public input sessions, which was fine. We had it organized around meeting with various areas in our district and soliciting all sorts of input on those goals and the phrasing of those goals and how many did we want to end up with. But that was a year and a half ago, and it's interesting that tonight, we're looking at Schrader data from 2 years ago, but we're willing to update that, yet we're not really willing to tackle the goals and the process that we started a year and a half ago. So the problem we now have in the strategic plan, which I put forward and wholeheartedly believed in a year and a half ago and still do, but we lost track in the process because it stalled a year and a half ago, and that's a long time in education, to have put something forward and then to be sitting and looking at it now and talking about the goals. There's nothing wrong with the goals. There's nothing wrong with the draft. They are modeled after many successful districts and counties. But what I envisioned would happen after I turned in the original plan was what I've continued to advocate for the past year and a half, that since we've had this and since we conducted those meetings. We ended them over a year ago last spring. And tonight I ask again, as I have in the past, where are the community teams? And I put forward an agenda item right ahead of this one as a way to compromise on how we might arrive at approving a strategic plan. And I suggested that we look at school site councils because they represent all stakeholders and they're established decision-making bodies in our district. What we currently have is we don't have any teams. We don't have any community teams. And when you look inside of successful strategic plans and why they are strategic plans, and I spent some time as an administrator in Martinez Unified, and we had a district strategic plan, and our district, as an administrator in the district, we worked on that plan together with community. And I've suggested over the last year and a half that we have community advisory teams to look at these strategic initiatives. So when you look at some folks' strategic plans, and you can't read this, but I can hold them up, it's just a couple, for example. You'll notice on here, here's the planning team, here's the planning team, here's the advisory team. And what you have on here are actual community members' names, business partners, community partners, parents, teachers, administrators, district staff. And you can actually pinpoint back to a planning team, and there's ownership and buy-in. But what we have at this point is not a team. We don't have those teams. What we have now, and I don't know where it came from, but a year and a half ago, we started a process of whittling down those goals. And now what we have are what I call dots on poster paper. And they're dots on poster paper without any true knowledge of who even placed those dots. That's not statistically valid. Having people wander in and stick dots on is not even statistically valid. If you look back at how you draw statistics together and how you analyze those. Asking random people to wander in and put dots up is not a statistically valid method. And I said, that actually they were unexplained, hastily called, poorly publicized sessions. For some reason, we sat for a year and a half without action, despite all of our various community meetings. A year and a half with no action, then suddenly there's some hastily called meetings which weren't publicized well. And at the one meeting, I think we heard about it a few days ahead of, we had the 72-hour notice. We had maybe 7 people or something come in. Half of them were staff putting dots up. I didn't see the parents. I didn't see the community members. I don't see names attached to the strategic initiatives, and I'd come up with 5. So frankly, I think a dot sticking process, it's kind of a consensus building tool, but it's something that I say is better suited if you're going to decide the theme of a junior prom, rather than trying to decide the future vision of a school district. It has to be more serious and consolidated to be statistically accurate and really to create that buy-in to these goals. The school board is not and should not be the team. And that's what it's come down to, is the school board is the team. I asked repeatedly over the last year and a half, where is that board direction on the process we're going to use in whittling down these goals and determining these goals? Where is that process? And I was referred to the February 22nd study session that we had, and the notion was, well, back in February 22nd, we had the study session on the strategic plan. So if you look at the minutes of February 22nd, here's exactly what our minutes say for February 22nd. Study session to discuss strategic planning. Period. End of it. Study session to discuss strategic planning. That's it on the minutes. Nowhere in there is board direction. There's no vote taken. There's no timeline. There's no plan for how, or to, the process that we will move through as a board. There is no direction. So what you have is study session to discuss strategic planning. When I ask where is board direction on that, this is something that should have been written out, spelled out, publicized, put on the website, so that the public understood exactly the steps we were going to take to whittle down these goals and to prioritize. And again, what's missing is the team. The board is not the team when it comes to developing a strategic plan. That's not our role. In the end, we are the ones who have to approve, adopt, and be responsible for it. So that's the extent. No record of any board discussion or direction, no record of any vote taking, no process defined for the public. Every time in the last 6 months, I think I've tried to put forward efforts to, and even as late as tonight, I still have the enthusiasm for the strategic plan. I try to put forward another proposal using our decision-making bodies that maybe we can get more consolidated buy-in, something that's more statistically accurate, which would be school site councils. You can put people's names, they're representatives from stakeholder groups. You could put people's names to the plan and create more buy-in. And that doesn't get a second. No discussion, no second. Okay, that's kind of a given. So what I see it as is foot dragging and disinterest over many months by members of the board. Now suddenly we're rushing to jam this thing through. And we had 2 really poorly publicized dot sticking sessions. And that's what we're going to use, statistically inaccurate, invalid, no community members identified with any sort of buy-in. And we're going to use that to determine the educational vision of a district. So I'm suggesting if the board, that the board wishes to vote on this without any